Hey everyone, Dan here. Before we get into it, if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe button. It helps a lot. And also keep in mind that these are my own thoughts, opinions, and ideas. These are not meant to be, nor should you take them as investment or trading advice in any way, shape, or form. Do your own due diligence, put in the work for yourself, and make your decisions based on that. Enjoy. All right, folks, here we are on Sunday, November 7th. I wanted to take a look at Spire Global before we get into the trading week ahead. Now, I had done a video, or two videos actually, a couple weeks ago on Spire and then ended up taking a position. And at that time, we were talking about not exactly knowing where Spire would go if it continued down this resistance, this yellow resistance line here. That was downtrend resistance, obviously. But since then, it popped out and then has basically been consolidating sideways in this range, and I actually think it's very, very positive motion and movement. And let's sort of talk about why. Because I'm terrible at remembering this, I'm going to say this now, which is an odd placement, but in the description below, the very first link that you'll see is a survey that I have about possibly launching a Patreon. If I launch a Patreon, it would just be so that I can provide more info, more content throughout the trading days and weeks and months. It would not replace my YouTube. Those would still come out for free. But if you would potentially be interested in something like that, I have a short little survey. It'll probably take you 3 to 5 minutes, and I would really, really appreciate the thoughts and the feedback. We're getting close to 50 people who've responded to that so far, and once I get to 50, I'm going to condense and sort of consolidate the info and sort of try to piece together what a Patreon would look like. So this is just to say, if that's anywhere in your frame of reference or field of vision, or even if you just have Patreons to if you're a patron of other folks and you have ideas, I would really, really appreciate the ideas, even if you wouldn't do a Patreon that I launched. That's totally fine. Okay, so sorry for the total non sequitur there. But getting back to it, so the reason that I feel good about this is I know that you want to think that when a stock comes down so hard and so heavy, like Spire has, that it's going to be able to kind of bounce back up and come up and fill this gap really quickly, right? So to be honest, I think if it was going to come up and fill this gap for the sake of filling the gap, I think it already would have happened. I think that would have happened relatively quickly. I think you would have seen a curl, somewhere in this range, and you would have seen it come up to fill that gap. Because that hasn't happened, if it fills the gap at some points and gets back over, say, $12, I think that's just going to be sort of an offshoot of time passing, just that the stock is moving through different price ranges over lengthy periods of time. But in any case, without beating that to death, this is why I think this is a good thing. Knowing that it's sort of unlikely that it's going to come down, suffer this really, really traumatic fall, and then just bounce right back up. The best thing to really be happening here is that it gets itself into a range and just condenses and consolidates and pins itself in, a range something like this, and just kind of builds itself a base from which to really start to make some movements in one direction or the other. Obviously, I have a long position now. I'm hopeful that movement is to the upside. But what I look for when something sort of ends up in a range like this is it making a big move one direction or another as it breaks the range. So I don't know exactly when it would break the range, but this box here extends through December 7th. So we'll see if it does so before then, over the next month. And if it does, I'd be looking for like a big, strong green candle stretching probably toward like $7 out of the top of this. And that to me would signify, okay, this might really be the start of something. I got to tell you though, to the flip side of that coin, it's always a double-edged sword. If it makes a strong movement downward, and a strong red candle that's pushing like low fives, that to me would be a similar movement just in the opposite direction and could signal that there's more pain ahead and that it hasn't actually found a floor yet. Obviously, having a long position, I think that it's more likely that it's going to consolidate and move up, but I don't know. And if it did break this strong to the downside like we're talking about, I would probably consider that as my stop loss. Right now I have it pinned as a $5 stop loss that I had just set just so I could set it and forget it. And obviously that would encompass the type of really strong downward move like I'm talking about. It would have to drop, over 10% in order for that to happen. But that's what I'm looking for at the moment. Continue to consolidate and just kind of move sideways in this range. I'm fine with that. They're just shares, so they're not going to decay like options or anything. And then just look for it to make its next big move. But I actually think it's a really, really positive situation for it to be in for the time being. And to me, all of these support and resistance that we had charted in the last video still stand. This one here is 579. So that would be the next thing for it to flip from resistance to support, and 621, or 620, I guess, 699, 816, and 888. So that's what I'm looking for on that end of things. I want to just kind of cover, the MACD is still doing a nice job holding this bullish crossover, and it's situated so far below the baseline that it has so much room to run to the upside. So I would look for it to just continue on this path. Even with the red candle that we have here, this minus 3.69% day on Friday, we don't even see it sort of curling down in order to put in, or sort of threaten a bearish crossover. So that's good that the momentum seems to be there at the moment. Still sitting just over oversold territory. So that's what you would expect after such a big drawdown. What I'd really pay attention to is right around here at the mid-range. If and when it gets up around 50 on the RSI, what does it do? Is it able to blow through 50 and kind of treat that as flipping from resistance to support? Does it really have a hard time getting over the 50 and then starts to come back down a little bit? So that's always the dicey zone, in my opinion. On the Ichimoku cloud, yeah, kind of nothing that I was going to say exciting, but nothing that's surprising here. This is a sell signal here when this conversion line crosses below the baseline, and it's still just kind of situated there. As this cloud gets thicker over in this area, this does signify stronger resistance. So be kind of interesting to see if it does make this consolidation move. It's kind of like two things colliding here. The Ichimoku cloud being thicker above and therefore being heavier resistance, but also me saying that if it makes a strong break to the upside out of this range, that it would have potentially a ton of momentum, and that could trigger a pretty solid breakout. So we'll see if those two things collide. I mean, there's plenty of situations where stocks move through a cloud, in a breakout. A breakout would kind of throw this into disarray anyway. Coming down close at the moment to getting support over this 12 EMA, or at least kind of wrestling with it, which is a good sign. It has to wrestle with all of these things before it can flip them from resistance to support. And of course, given the situation that SPIRE has been in since this big drawdown starting September, it's going to be fighting all of the resistance, right? There's just not support to really speak of at the moment, but this range could be that. It's just still in its beginning phases, but if that can hold, to me, that's what that has a good chance of becoming. On the data side of things, I would look for more analysts to be coming in, especially if there starts to be some strong movement, because there's a lot of return potential here based on consensus price targets, and that's even with 2 holds and 1 buy. So normally you'd see this because there's a ton more buys than holds or sells, certainly, but even with this spread where there's 2 holds and 1 buy, quite a lot of upside there. Coming down over 7% still in the last month. Amazing. On the short side of things, it's like kind of a mixed bag here. So cost to borrow, relatively high. Utilization, pretty high. But then as a percentage of the free floats, very, very low, just over 2%. So I don't know if they just have I feel like we checked this once before, but I can't commit all of these things to memory. I mean, the free float's not insanely high. So I don't exactly know why that is. It might be a factor of unlocks or things coming if the stock is relatively new to the market. I don't know. But if somebody has insight into exactly why that is, particularly why the utilization would be so high, while the sort of short interest percentage of the free float is so low, feel free to drop that in the comments below. And if it looks solid, I'll pin it for other folks to consider. But yeah, that's where things are as far as I see them at the moment. And yeah, just for transparency, I still have my long position, haven't made any changes to it other than to have put that $5 stop loss on it just so I could kind of protect myself if it does make a strong break to the downside. But other than that, I don't particularly have an exit plan to the upside other than to see what it does when it breaks this range and kind of go from there. All right, folks, so I hope that you have had a nice weekend and that you get your trading week off to a good start tomorrow, and I appreciate you watching. I will see you in the next video.